Hey, this is Aaryan Shah, and I'm hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
What's up, guys? Rob here from Row Live Entertainment. I'm here hanging out with Aaryan Shah, and I'm excited to be talking to you. I've been listening to the record since it dropped, and I gotta admit, man, like I was in a vulnerable place last week. And when I started listening to the record, that opening track like messed me up. Like I felt like it was just like you were talking to me directly. And you were telling me from what I got from this song was like you were telling me to really just like forget about all the drama. Just like move forward, move forward. And like listening through the rest of the record, like I just felt this like I don't know, this energy that you were bringing into my life. And I feel like that's the beauty of music. Like that's why we all fall in love with music. And I feel like that's why you create as an artist. Dive me into that creative process of that record and like what kind of place were you in before you or as you were entering the writing process of this? And like, is this something that really like gravitated towards you?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you saying that, and I think the project maybe hits the most when you're in a vulnerable place.
Yeah.
Like, I was talking to someone recently, and they're like, I listened to the album, and I was like, I f***ed up. I should have listened to it like late at night. Like, this is like I wasn't ready for where that was gonna take me. I don't know. I think. I worked on the project over the course of 26 months, which is like a very long, arduous journey. And my mental health like shifted a lot over the course of that. Like something I've been opening up about recently is just that I've been struggling with bipolar. So I'd say at the very beginning of the album, I was still, maybe I was like diagnosed at the time, but I still was unmedicated. And I think navigating that over the course of several years, like it was just, I was following like the tale of the last album I did, A Love Letter to LA. So there was just this natural burnout I experienced with every album. There's this natural kind of like, there's this like residual from the album before that I'm like, everything I'm making now feels so love letter adjacent, and it's so easy to just make that, and you're like, well, I could put out another record in 6 months. It's just going to sound like a copy of this one, or it's going to sound like throwaways from this one. So I think what we had to do was like strip it down to nothing, kind of leave all the massive production, all the cinema out of it. We were like, let's just like take it to core songwriting, let's really just like me and a piano, Kisiko, one of like my main collaborator, just be him on the acoustic guitar. And we started with like these very early demos of like Vienna and Budapest, and then I solo traveled, and I was in Vienna and Budapest for the first time. And I think like just as the process continued, for the first 6 months, like I really think the first 8 months, I think we were just like very confused about where to go next. I felt like we put all of it on the line with Love Letter. We were like, it's really difficult to find direction from this point. And that led us to this place where we were like, by September 2023, those sounds started to come back, and for like Fission, the orchestral elements started being introduced. But we were at this place where we felt so strong about, if you take each song on this album and you take it right back to the piano, like I'm very proud of the songwriting.
Yeah.
And that was around the time I started medicating, and that I think informed the rest of the album and the rest of the process. And as my brain chemistry changed, I think we really started figuring out the arc of the project. And I think that's why maybe you feel like, oh, we started this place, and then it just like gets heavy,
Yeah. It's cool that you stripped everything out and you focused primarily on the songwriting. You can see that evolution in your songwriting. You can see the way that you kind of tell a story without giving us the exact, meaning behind it, right? Like, how do you feel how did you learn to write the way that you do? And, over the last few records, how has that really changed for you? That has it been like a drastic change for you? Has it been like a natural progression for you? Like, how do you feel about that songwriting process?
It's so interesting to reflect on that, because I don't know. I like when I was 16, I went to like songwriting school for a little bit, and I picked up some really interesting things along the way, and just it opened me up to a lot of different genres, and it's so easy to like live in a bubble or live in a box like based on what you grew up listening to, but then you're like, I don't know, there's like a lot of poetry in rap, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
poetry in country music and so forth. And I think I haven't like I've really been self-trained throughout my career, but like my little windows of time where I was trained by people, I think it taught me what to look for and like how to go about educating myself. And I think just like as I got older, my taste changed, right? And it just continues to evolve, and my palette kept expanding. But when I look at my catalog and I think about each project as it's evolved, there's something really nice about taking as much time as I do between projects, because again, if I like made something right after this, there is this natural style of writing that I live in. By not writing anything, by taking so much time and just living life and trying to have these new experiences, by the time I get back to, hey, like I kind of want to write lyrics to this, the first thing is that I hit the block, like I'm not able to write. I think I've completely lost it. I'm like, this is shit. Yeah, I'm like, oh wow, like I was like I peaked, like I'm done. Like there's I did my best work already, and to me that's where I think the beauty really is, because then it's like, this is my next challenge, because I know what I've written, and if I stay in that same spot, I'm gonna hate myself for it. I'm gonna feel like I didn't push myself beyond what I've already done. You get tired of saying the same things. Ultimately, like as much as I do think I've evolved, like a lot of my mental health, a lot of the lows kind of feel the same over the years, right? They just kind of change as you get older and you cope with things differently. But it's like I've hit that point so many times, especially with this record, where I was like, how many times can I say the same thing that I've been saying for the last 6-7 years? So it was really about finding a new way to do that. And also it's like, when I was 18, 19, 20, and I was just like in my angsty, grungy phase, like, or if I was just going through something, like Lil Peep was someone that I listened to a lot, and Mac Miller was someone I listened to a lot. And like these days I find myself listening to a lot of Radiohead, and there is something, I don't know, like Tom York, there's something really interesting about like his approach to how he goes about things. I listen to Ethel Cain, and she has such a beautiful way of like approaching her records. So with that, I have to like acknowledge that I'm growing up the same way, and I need to, if I don't do that, I think it's like a disservice to my fans.
Yeah.
To be like, great, well, you're making the same shit you were making 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago,
I feel like it's hard to step away from the music. Once you're like done with this record, you release it, it's out in the world. I feel like it's hard to like not want to go back into the studio. I feel like a lot of artists, as soon as we're sitting down talking about the new album that's going to drop in a couple weeks, and they're like, I'm already on the next album.
Yeah.
I'm already on. And I feel like that's amazing because you have so much creativity going on, but you're right. Like it ends up starting to feel like just a blend of the last record, or
Right.
the reason for it. I've always seen deluxes as like, that's probably what a deluxe means, because it's like, it was extra songs that obviously didn't fit on the album, but you were still on that kind of like mentality or
Yeah,
writing
you were
cycle.
still in that world, like I get it. I feel like I'm someone that's pretty vocally against deluxes.
Yeah.
And that's like not out of disrespect to artists that do, because I understand it. And there's sometimes like I love, I mean, Sabrina Carpenter dropped her deluxe, and I loved every song on it. So I'm never complaining about more music. I think just my approach to albums is, this is very much a story. There's very much it's not linear all the time, but there is a start and an end to this. For me to add other songs, I would look at it and be like, well, then why wasn't it on the project in the first place? And if I'm at a place now where, obviously over the last couple months I've just been working on records, and you're like, should this have been on the album? And I was like, no, clearly not. I knew the story, and the story was locked a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was about perfecting that. Now I think the things that I am working on, they sound so much like Birds. There's a little bit that's like pushing forward, and I'm like, great, I need to continue working on this if it keeps calling me back to it. And I like something I think that really clicked for me with in the process of creating Birds was, if a year from now I'm still listening to this record, even after I get tired of, you listen to the same demos over and over, and I still think this is a good record, that tells me that I've made something that's like, in my like definition, timeless, And that was like a song like Budapest. Like Budapest, I almost had complete in March 2023, so 2 years ago,
on this
exactly.
For some time,
and about a year ago, we probably laid down all the final vocals to it. We put it out in July of last year, and now I listen to it on the album in context, and I'm like, that was the right choice. If I got tired of it at some point, it was probably like, this one needs to stay in the vault. But it never stopped being something. I never lost that love for it.
Yeah, I feel like that's hard too, though, because you do sit with these songs for so long before we finally get to listen to them, and I'm sure they go to so many different forms and styles, and maybe the lyrics change, maybe the melody changes. In saying that, with this album, were there any particular songs that you felt that you had to like just kind of restructure, even though they might have been done in 2023?
That's a really good question. I'm like going through the track list as you're saying that. I know, I kind of talk a lot about how Vienna was just a nightmare, and it's such a fun record, and I think over the years I've really embraced that I am a pop artist at my core. For years I was so like, I'm not a pop artist. I'm like anti-pop or whatever. It was just like the angst that came with it. No, I very much love pop music. I just name dropped Sabrina Carpenter. I love Justin Bieber, and like those. I've been on like a One Direction kick lately, and songs like Vienna are like, I love that, and to the point that I want to make that, and I want that to be part of my contribution to music and to the world. But a song like that is tough, because you're like, how do I create something that kind of lives in the Max Martin like school of thought? How does it live in this, like, the way the Swedish pop music like almost formula exists, but still very much is my own, still lives
still very
within
raw.
the world. Still very raw, it has to exist within the album. It has to exist within my discography, and then more importantly, like my story and my just like vulnerability on the record, which is like the funniest thing, because then you put out a record and people are like, this is so fun, and people are dancing to it, and they're also like, why can't you make a happy song, dude?
That was me with pop punk. It was like I'm dancing and jumping to every song, and it's like, oh shit, he's talking about heartbreak.
Right? You like listen to everything, and you're like, this is so depressing, but like there's a reason it connects, right? And I mean, I know Vienna has gone through like 60 versions. Vantage Point went through a lot, because there was a lot of
60
versions. it was 60 versions over the course of a year and a half, because we did the fully acoustic guitar version, the synth version, so many drums, like purely on piano, like, and then the final version kind of has a little bit of everything, which is it was just our way of.
At this point, you're just like, just put it all in there.
Yeah, we were like, you know what, like, there's a little bit from everything, just like throw it in,
just mix it.
But it like it worked in the way that we were like, if we were gonna make a pop song, there's a version where the hooks had like drums in them, and we were like, now it just feels like we've taken a song again. We like stripped it down to nothing when we started, and we've like diluted it. We've made something that just feels cheap. And I think that's the worst feeling, when you're like, this is such like a good song to me at its core. If I'm just gonna like radio-fy it or whatever, just if I'm just gonna try to make it commercial, it can feel really cheap. So it was like, what's the version of this that like pays homage to my favorite pop artist, but also like the synths come in the final hook, and I'm like, I hope Mike Dean loves it. Like I hope he listens to it, and he's like, I don't even know if that's the kind of music he listens to personally, but I hope he's
he
like,
will now.
That's And it's like, I hope so. You know, like Vantage Point, the same thing.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of like Yeezus inspo on that, and we like it was about finding. Yeah, I think that's the thing with like different versions and restructuring things too. What I've learned and what like Kisiko, what his role in my life has been. You know, sometimes you can have like the best drummer, the best guitarist, or the best synth player like in your arsenal. You can reach out, have those resources, but ultimately, like it's just about what sounds the best, right?
Yeah.
So much of this album, there were a lot of really talented people that came in, that we brought them in. They were a part of our sessions, and then a lot of it is like I ended up doing that. Kisco ended up doing that, and we're like not your professional like guitar players or whatever, right? But ultimately, it's just like the feelings there, and I can think about each song and I see like a session. You know, I see every stem, but ultimately, like what everyone ends up hearing is this packaged, mastered version with the album artwork.
Yeah.
And it feels so cohesive in that way. And it's like, well, then all that really matters is like, did the feeling come through? You know?
You mentioned earlier that you didn't really have like professional. You weren't taught professionally. Like you basically like learned this on your own. And when you did get taught professionally, it was like in little spurts.
Yeah.
But there's a song, Love is Violence, which like I really love. I
Thank you.
love your vocal tone on that track, and I love how simple with the piano it is. But I also feel like that vocal tone is so challenging to carry on through an entire song like that. So I'm curious, with that song in particular, what was it like recording the vocals? Is this your normal vocal tone? Like, is this a comfort zone for you? Because it felt like you had no issues with it throughout the
That's
entire
really
track.
sweet of you to say, and I hope I hope this sounds right, but like it is generally like a comfortable vocal tone for me.
Yeah.
I think when I'm with my friends, my voice sounds a little different.
Yeah.
But I think I'm generally a more like soft spoken person. Something like Love is Violence very much exists in this range that feels very like home for me.
Mm-hmm.
And there are like things that we push along the way, right? Josh, my recording engineer, I think stepped into a little bit like somewhere between like just being the recording engineer and also being like the vocal producer. So, you know, I would come in and think of like I would have harmonies written down. Like when me in the studio is a very interesting character, because like I'll come in with like a sheet printed and like I have time codes, because like I'm not trying to
You're like
waste
a film
anything down.
major.
Yeah, like I honestly I feel like in another life I would be. And there's like check boxes and it's like lower third harmony and like we do 4 of those, and like upper third harmony there's 4 of those, and so forth. And like Josh is very much on top of that, but he's also my ears outside the booth, where a lot of these you know, this is the most vocal production I've had on any album. Like Fission and Love is Violence have probably close to 100 vocal tracks each, right?
Shit.
And that's because Josh, like, I'll take a harmony and he's like, I want 4 of those, so that Dylan, my mixing engineer, can like really play with that space, let alone when we get to like Atmos mixing. But where it gets interesting is like, you know, there's certain like minor harmonic chords that come in there, which are like things I haven't really played with before. And I think like maybe this is another conversation, but I do find that some of it might be that I grew up listening to Indian music, and that's probably playing in my head. That's like we're operating on a slightly different scale. But that to me, I think, is where like the challenge was. I think that's where the fun was, because the records felt bigger and I could use my voice as an instrument. And then when you get to the outro of that song, outside of the production and the strings becoming this, you know, like medium crescendo, it's also like my voice starts to belt.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the most fun. And I think that's where like tour played a big role, because I love to belt on tour.
Yeah, you
so
get
I'm like,
to explore it.
So I'm like, why? Like this should exist on the record. I think tour completely changed how we like made this album.
Yeah. Going back to like growing up listening to Indian music, it's a different cadence. It's a different type of BPM at the same time. Do you feel that ever influenced your creative process? Maybe not specifically with this album, but like just in general, like do you go back and maybe listen to some of your favorite like Indian artists or like Indian music and kind of think of ways to somewhat represent it in your music, but not like to the point where it's like, oh, I can hear that.
It's interesting. It's one of those things that I've always heard, even with like my earlier music, and sometimes I think at first it was my South Asian fans that were like, there's something here that feels like Bollywood music, and I'm like, I don't know what the you're talking about. Like, where in Renegade do you
Yeah.
hear that? And just the whoa in the hook, like people felt that, and it was interesting. Like as like I say whoa a lot in my discography. There's a lot of just vocalizing.
It's just a plug-in.
Yeah, no, that's all it is. Is that with like a shit ton of reverb. I think by the time we got to this album, just like leaning more into those things that felt right, and like there's a song, or there's maybe two. There's Interlinked and there's Fusion, which the chord progression is really interesting, and I picked those chord progressions. Like I wrote that on the piano, which for me, like I think consciously, I was thinking Radiohead. And it's funny, like my friends hear like a chord progression like that now, and they text me and they're like, "This is so Aryan coded," and I'm like, "Oh, cool!" Like people know that
Nice.
there are these interesting things that feel like me. And we were in Dallas, I think, and I was with Josh and Lauren, and we were like, this was the night before the show, and I guess we like started to have this conversation where we were like, "Wow, is this music like has this always been influencing like the music that I make and that we all like make together?" And I don't know, I how could it not, right? Like if you grew up, if the first things I was hearing was Bollywood music from Indian movies and all of that, I'm like, of course it's like somewhere very deep in my DNA. It's like the building blocks of how I write, how I compose. But since then, I think I've been revisiting songs from my childhood, and I hear certain artists, and I'm like, oh my god, like that of course, like this is where I find that, and maybe that is on some level subconsciously for South Asian fans too, why they resonate with me, because it's like, oh, we all grew up watching the same movies, and I don't write in Hindi or anything like that, but there is this connection to like this modern contemporary English music and like our roots in a sense. I don't know. It's one of those things that I need to reflect on, and then I'll turn 25 this year, and like maybe have like a big life reflection moment and see where that takes me.
Make that into an album.
Yeah, I might.
The life reflection moment.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like all of the albums are like a life reflection moment on some level. But it is interesting because I think just feeling like the identity crisis of being South Asian, being Indian, born and raised in LA, completely making the kind of music that I'm making. It's always been a little hard to navigate. As I'm getting older, I think I'm trying to find just who exactly I am, how much like I want to embrace it, and a lot of that is a reflection of my childhood and how much I grew up in that. So I do think, especially like I'm someone who travels a lot. Like I've been very lucky to travel the world at a very young age. I think as I continue to go and travel around the world and probably get back to India, which it's probably been like 10 years since I've been, I would love to see as an adult now how it influences me, how much of that I want to like take in and consciously like reference. It's like you're in the studio and you're like, we reference certain songs, we throw certain things on, we're like, this feels like a good vibe, like let's think about this for like the sub to vocal ratio, let's think about this for how the harmonies are panned. I've never been in a situation where I was like, let's throw on like this Indian song that like means a lot to me. And I actually could, like, Josh is the one who was like, next time we're gonna do that, and
that's cool.
We'll see how it probably will just feel more like me than it ever has before.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that you don't know that you need to discover or rediscover or experience.
Totally.
But I love that the fact that like you mentioned Budapest and Vienna, like you were there, and these songs kind of happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I mean, the location definitely does play a role and an influence in the music or how you're going to create it. When it comes to your team and yourself, like in the studio with this album in particular, were there any like moments where you created a production without necessarily using an instrument or necessarily using a computer or a beat, like something that just kind of got created from scratch? Like, did you experience that on this record?
That is interesting. And you're saying like without even like taking it to the piano or anything like that. I feel like some of them have started very like voice memo-ish, you know. It's interesting. There's a couple things that can start with like the right lyric, but to me that's a little harder to go and then find a sound and create that based on it. Typically I think I like to have like my melody and the production go a little hand in hand in the very early stages, which is why Kisiko and I, like, I'm not someone that like goes into sessions just like regularly. Like I don't like pop in and we're like,
you
let's
want to
see
be
what
prepared.
happens. It's very like the ones that I'm prepared for are like our recording sessions. They're purely vocals.
Yeah.
Everything pre-production is like a very intentional camp that like I host, and when I say camp, I mean like Kisco comes over and it's like a sleepover for us. For like he flies in from Vancouver and we have like a week together, and everything is like we don't know where we're going, but it's intentional. It's for the album. With that being said, I think "The Skies Cried for You" was one of those that is like a very heavy record for me, but it came from something that my sister said. And very quickly, I just recorded a voice message of, like a voice memo of, just like a melody I had based on that. And then I went back that night, and that was actually a year ago. My dog passed away a year ago tomorrow.
That never goes away. Yeah, like I'm still feeling mine, and that was like three years ago now.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Likewise.
it's one of those that just like sticks with you, and unfortunately the next night was my first single back, and that was Love Is Violence. And it's such a horrible feeling to like release a record when that's happening. And the morning of the Love Is Violence release, I pretty much like took that voice message for Skies, and I did a lot of the vocal production I was talking about, and I didn't really have even like the piano or the strings or anything. It was just a purely a cappella choir like version of the song, just so I could play it for my mom and my sister while we were grieving, and I was just like, hey, I don't even fully have lyrics, but like this is just like a feeling that like I want to dedicate this one to her. And unfortunately come full circle in a really tragic way. Like the night or a couple weeks before the album release, my vocal coach, who again was like there for like a stint when I was like 15, 16, she just passed away from lung cancer. And I got the news, and they told me her funeral was the night of the album release. And I was just like very tough for us, and we were traveling, and we had like the Dolby events and all.
Yeah,
and
you
all
had
that.
you had a packed schedule.
It was a very tough time, and I was lucky enough to be able to at least send her my love right before she had passed away.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was, the night of her funeral, like "The Skies Cried for You" came out, and I was like,
My gosh.
yeah, I just
Damn.
life just keeps finding a way to,
Yeah.
But I was able to like send a lot of love to her family and the people that we had that she raised a lot of us. And I think it was as much as like that's just like a heavy thing to process. It made me realize that a song like that will probably keep finding its way back into my life as time passes, as people pass. Like you said, like that's something that never goes away. I think like Bella will always be with me, and like I have her paw print like tatted on my thumb, and in that way, like it's nice to have a record like that you're like I was able to memorialize not just this feeling, but this like this person or this family member, this friend like in my life, and I see it doing that for other people, and that's like I'm grateful. I'm happy that I can be able to do that for other people in that process.
I feel like that's gonna be one of those songs where like you either won't perform it live, or when you do perform it live, it's gonna be so difficult.
I was just thinking this. We're like working on the set list, and for months, like my sister Ria has been saying like, "There's no way you're doing Skies," right? She's like the absolute. She's like, you're gonna cry on stage, right? She's like, you won't be able to get through it. My best friend Omer is like, you have to do Skies. Like, think about what it means to all these people and what it's going to mean. And like, I don't know, we had it's just like a little anecdote, but there was a show in London we had last year, and before the show, there was this mom that reached out to us, and the subject line was like a dying mom's wish from Ireland, and she had 3 children, and she was like, my youngest is a huge fan, and I have cancer, and I'm not sure like how much longer I have. Is it possible? We weren't able to like afford the meet and greet tickets. Like, is it possible for us to see? And like, of course, we like took care of them and we got to see them, and we had a really special moment with them. But in that, what I realized before going on stage was like, it's so easy to think these shows are about me and to have that moment, and of course your ego gets stroked, and of course you're like, I do this and the crowd comes up, and I do this and they go down. Like, it's a very like superhuman, unnatural thing to feel. But just knowing that I was going to see this mom and her daughter after the show, I was like, this is a memory they're going to have for the rest of their lives. For her daughter, like, she'll always remember that her mom went and did that for her. Especially being as young as she was, I was like, my job tonight is to curate this experience that like all these people who came alone or they came with the loved one, like, this is like their memories. I just get to be like a part of that, the soundtrack to that. I just get to be affiliated with that. And with Skies, like, I there are certain songs, I'm sure you have them too, songs that like you've grieved to, that like you've mourned someone to, and then you go to see that artist in concert and they don't play it, and I'm like, that was an important song.
But then on the drive home, I'm like, thank God I didn't want to cry in front of everybody.
Yeah, but like, you go into it and you're like, I'm going to sob at the show. So I am having a tough time figuring out if I can do it or not. But if I can, I would love to, because in that way, I think a lot of people will need that. And if I'm able to, I would love to be able to like give that to people,
You've got a lot of work to do.
a lot of therapy up ahead. We'll see how it goes.
During the process of this album, was there a particular song that you felt was difficult to finalize or even just record vocals to? And then how did you really go about it? Like, what allowed you to be able to finalize that?
I think Interlinked was a really tough one. That was the last one that we finished. One of the first ones that we started. Oof. Interlinked, like, Vienna went through 60 versions. Skies was touch and go because I just break down every time. Interlinked was 3 different songs that became one, and it was,
as the name says.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. No, it was interesting because at one point I think we brought all the songs together. I was like, I call him Kissy. I was like, Kissy, if we just stitch these records together, they can exist in 3 acts. And it was a 10-minute long song. And I was like, I don't even want to tell Lauren. I was like, Lauren's going to lose her shit. There's already like 3 5.5-minute songs.
It's possible.
It's possible.
You can make it work.
Next album, it will. I might have to.
It's for the deluxe version.
For the deluxe version. I was like, no, she's going to kill me. But I was like, yeah, what if it's like a 10-minute record? And it had to just like keep evolving, and then things started getting cut, and I was like, okay, there's like, it didn't even sound like what Interlinked sounds like now. I think it was like, there was one called Is the War Over, there's one called Psychosis, like they were just all brought together. And then I think somewhere in there, the third record, which was like independent of that, like I found that chord progression, and again, I was going for something very Radiohead. Everything in its right place was like huge inspiration.
Constantly playing, yeah.
And then Ethel Cain had dropped Punish, and we were just like, this is just such a good feeling. I mean, it's menacing and it's horrifying, but we were like, this is what's really inspiring to us. I think the challenge there was like production, trying to find what it needed to be, but within that, what I was supposed to write about. And I think that's like a testament to what we were talking about earlier about my mental health changing over the course, right? And just my headspace changing throughout the course, because in the very beginning, I think I was just angry about so many things in my life, and the first versions of 2 out of 3 of the songs were just, I felt like there's a lot I had to get off my chest. I think by the end, or somewhere, close to the end, it was like, there is a pivotal moment that we're missing on the project, and I knew the project wouldn't be complete without it.
Yeah.
And it was, we're going through this journey of like essentially healing, but healing through the process of medication. And we start to feel all the nuance, and we start to feel that things are like complicated and they're pretty heavy. But then all of a sudden we're at fusion, right? And how are we at this place of like accepting that, being brick walled emotionally is just this horrifying thing I'm going to live with? I was like, I think what we're missing is the actual feeling of the moment you start to feel that this is like my brain chemistry is changing. And that, to me, I think one of the first lines that was written was, the poison found its way to my blood. And I think one of the next lines, which was like early in the song, was like, tell them I was full of love in my eulogy, will they remember me? And I was like, we're finding it. And we were so like down to the wire. Like, album was due December, before everyone left for the holidays, which means mastering, mixing. We still hadn't recorded it, that last session. And I had to fly out to Vancouver because I was like, we have like 24, 48 hours to get this right. And of course, my incredible timing, it's during the elections, right?
Great.
So we're in his studio, and we're working on this. We have like the lighthouse playing because like, Robert Eggers fan, would just love the visuals, super inspiring. And we have the monitor with the election tracker, and we're just watching states flip red and blue, and we're just like, this is a horrible feeling, but maybe for the best. It's like contributing to, I couldn't not watch it, but it was like, this is, real world events are influencing what's happening.
Panic
here.
mode is like kicking in. Yeah.
Yeah, panic for sure, for sure. It was definitely a rough night in that way. But once we kind of figure that out, there's also something beautiful about, the original version had the Ryan Gosling voiceover from Blade Runner. And granted, we took that out, but it was such a callback to Renegade, from my first project, because that was inspired where there's a scene in like the red light district where they're like, he's like, didn't you listen to your friends? Don't you know what I am? And I was like, not to, every album you start to feel like, okay, well, this might be the end of my arc, and maybe I can look back at my career and this is the full thing. And it's never that. But looking at these 5 albums, I'm like, wow, like I really do think like, whether it's full circle or whether it's like we've completed the arc, it was like, it was a nice callback to not only my first album, but what essentially became my biggest song, you know?
Yeah.
Very unintentionally too.
Cool, full circle moment though.
Definitely a couple of those in the project, and all of them were unintentional. I think there's a time where I wanted to really Taylor Swift it, and like she's so brilliant with like saying certain lines, and you're like, fans will remember this from 10 years ago, and they know your favorite number, and I love that, and I think there's a version of that I'd love to embrace in the future. But I think in creating something so honestly, you just naturally end up saying things, and you're like, oh wow, like I didn't mean that. But if you followed along, you can tell that a lot of this is like question and answer. Like a lot of it is call and response. A lot of it is, this album posed a question that I didn't even mean to pose, and this next one answered it, but then it gave you a new one. And I guess it's kind of part of the just like the honesty in the writing,
Yeah. I mean, I'm like stumped because this record, just like I mentioned, upon first listen, I just got stuck on it. Like,
Thank you.
And it shows that the passion and the trials and tribulations that you kind of went through during the process of it. And it's cool to have, unfortunately, those heartbreaks happened with your dog and your vocal coach, but it's like, I feel like it must feel in some ways amazing knowing that you're in that right path and you're creating these songs that go hand in hand with like the things that are happening in your life. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly.
No, I'm following you.
But like, I feel like it's like you were in the right time in the right time zone with your music, with your space,
That's a cool
with
way to
everything
put
else.
it. Yeah.
Right? Like, and I don't know, like I'm excited because like this is, for me, I hate to say this, but this is my first experience of you. This album
That's
is
really
my first
cool.
experience of you.
Honestly,
and
that makes me really happy that it's this one, you know?
yeah. And I'm excited to hear everything else, and I'm excited to hear everything else moving forward as well. I guess to close it, because I feel like I could talk to you forever.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we could go for another hour.
Like I think
if
we
you
need
let
to
me
just go
talk,
into
I'll
the studio.
keep talking. Yeah.
But I guess to close us off, it's like with this album, you've taught me a lot about this process. But for you, like, what did you learn about yourself or about this experience that you didn't like realize prior to kickstarting this record?
That's a great question. You just banger after banger questions. It's too early in the morning for me for my gears to be turning like this. I think a lot of it is embracing who I am, as cliche as that sounds. I'm talking about it from the perspective, like sonically.
Yeah.
You know, we tried to push away for so long. We did these massive cinematic sounds. Like, we're good. We've done that. Let's go somewhere new. And we did go somewhere new, but I think understanding like that's very much in my blood. You know, it's just who I am. It's how I create. It's the things I have love for. It's like I might as well wear an A24 hat in like every video, you know? I think there's something really great about that. I think trying to find profundity, as pretentious as that sounds, like trying to make everything poetic in some way is just unnatural. But leaning into what things actually are, I think that ultimately like is who you are as an artist, right? Like it is the lens that you view the world through. And rather than trying to go and just like grab at things, it's like, well, if I just see the world this way, and my sister says something that just is so moving and so simple but like heartbreaking, it means a lot. That's what I need to like grab, you know? I don't need to make a version of a song for this grief that I'm going through. There's something like right in front of me, and I know that like, I mean, not that I know, but I am sure other people maybe would have heard that and would have been devastated, but wouldn't have heard a record out of it. And for me, I feel like I did that. I feel like I keep harping on like honesty and authenticity, but a lot of it is leaning into that. It's leaning into like trusting myself. That was a big part of it, taking this long, between projects. It was, I say this a lot, but people really do have every right to tell me to go myself and tell me that like they are disappointed in having to wait this long. But what I'm so lucky to have is that people trust in me because I've trusted in myself, and they understand. Like, I think fission starts and fission ends, and for me, very much, and from what I've seen from my fans, they understand, and I think there's more. Maybe this is like the right note to leave it on, but I think a lot of my career used to be looking at others and using that as a way of finding direction. And I think we'll never stop being fans first,
Right.
I think we'll never stop taking influence from the world. But the shift I felt on this one was, for the first time, I think people are looking at me for that direction. And I think I'm trusting myself to take a sharp turn left and go into the unknown. And I'm very lucky to have like an army of fans around the world that will go there with me.
Yeah.
There's no more guardrails. There's no more guiding light. It's wherever I feel is the right place to take it. And that's a heavy thing to say, and that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But I have to learn to trust in myself,
Damn. That's a lot to take in. That is a lot to take in. But like I said, I'm a new fan. I'm excited to stay in this journey with you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure everyone else is as well. So thanks, dude, for hanging out with me.
Thank you for having me.
You guys be sure to check out the new album. It's titled
Do You See the Birds Too?
Thanks for watching. I'm from Live.
Thanks, guys.